After 3 years, I finally found my husband, who had gone missing during our honeymoon. However, no matter whether I broke down in despair or became hysterical, he remained completely cold and calm, having suffered from amnesia. The heir of the wingers you keep talking about really isn't me. Don't come looking for me again, or Nora will make me sleep on the sofa. The doting on another woman in his every word pierced my heart with 1,000 holes. Just as I was about to give up, I accidentally overheard his friend asking him. 3 years ago, just to be with Nora, you faked your death during your honeymoon with Hazel. Now, you want to go back to living the good life as the heir of the wingers, so you're pretending to have amnesia in front of her. Don't you think you're being too hard on her? Jeff slammed down a glass of alcohol. Nora is already pregnant with my child. I must let her into the family. I gave up all hope then, turning around to stop my in-laws who were about to rush over. Lydia, Daniel, I've seen him in person. This man is not Jeff. I had just hung up the phone when I ran straight into Jeff Winger as he walked out of the bar. Seeing me, he froze for a moment, then shook his head helplessly. I've already told you many times, stop coming to find me. I really am not your husband. A trace of pity appeared on his friend's face, and he advised me, Hazel, you don't look like you've slept well for several days. Go back and rest first. I shook off his hand and looked at Jeff. It's not several days, it's 3 years. From the day you went missing, I haven't slept a full night. I was called a jinx, blamed as the culprit who caused your death. Devastated, my mind was hazy, and I fell down the stairs. Even the baby wasn't saved. For these past 3 years, I searched the whole country, tortured by self-blame and guilt. In the end, I looked at the plain band worn on his ring finger. In the end, my newlywed husband tells me that he fell in love with another woman. Listening to my slightly trembling voice, Jeff's expression shifted slightly. He subconsciously touched the plain ring on his hand, where the newlywed ring I personally designed used to be worn. The moment he touched the plain ring, his eyes suddenly became clear, and he said impatiently, it's a tragic story, but what does all of this have to do with me? Looking at the indifference on his face, my very last bit of wavering completely dissolved. What did it have to do with him? Wasn't he the culprit who caused all of this? Thinking of the eyes of my parents-in-law, full of anticipation before I left the house, hoping I would bring their missing son home, my heart ached. It turned out that something even harder to accept than Jeff's death was that he had planned all of this. These past days, I was filled with grief as I told him about our past over and over again, trying to awaken his memory. Had he not felt even a bit moved? Or rather, was he mocking my pathetic state with Nora Melville? Meeting my bloodshot eyes, Jeff frowned and subconsciously took a few steps toward me. He just raised his hand. Slap. Nora slapped me right across the face, pointing at my nose and cursing furiously. What are you pretending to be aggrieved for? Chasing someone else's boyfriend all day and calling him your husband, how pathetic are you? Seeing the bright red finger marks rising on my face, a trace of shock flashed across Jeff's face. Without even thinking, he immediately pulled Nora behind him. Nora just has a blunt personality. Don't mind her. The look he gave me was full of vigilance and wariness, terrified that I would harm his beloved woman. A burning pain dulled across my face. Thinking of the conversation I had overheard inside the bar, it felt like a massive hole had been ripped open in my heart. The amnesia was an act, but his coldness and heartlessness toward me were real. So I booked a plane ticket home right there and then and looked at Jeff. Don't worry, I won't disturb you two again. Since he liked to pretend to be dead, I would fulfill his wish. Early the next morning, just as I was about to leave, I suddenly received a call from my father-in-law. Lydia had a heart attack and hasn't come out of the ICU yet. She keeps muttering Jeff's name. Is he really not Jeff? Lydia was my mother-in-law's name. Hearing that she had a heart attack, I couldn't even hold the steering wheel steady. My father-in-law, Daniel, who was always calm and steady, now had a hint of a sob in his voice. I don't know if Lydia will make it through this time. I'm afraid she won't even get to see her son before she leaves. My heart sank, and I quickly turned the steering wheel around. Daniel, don't worry. I will go find him right now. The moment he opened the door and saw it was me, Jeff's face turned cold. I shoved the phone into his hand, not caring about anything else. Your mother's had a heart attack, and she just wants to see you one last time. Are you still going to pretend, even at a time like this? Hearing that his own mother was in trouble, Jeff's expression changed drastically. He gripped the phone tightly, but just as he connected a video call, a finger with acrylics hung up the call. Nora looked at me with an attitude and slammed the phone right into my face. Are you sick? Didn't you say yesterday that you wouldn't come to harass us anymore? Anxiety flashed through Jeff's eyes as he reached back for the phone. She said Under my gaze, he changed his words mid-sentence. Her mother-in-law is in trouble and wants me to pose as her husband to comfort her. Nora snorted. What do you mean, pose as her husband? She must be lying, trying to force you to admit you are her husband. I've seen plenty of these jealousy tactics. You are not allowed to call. If you dare do it, don't touch me tonight. Seeing her angry, Jeff quickly tried to please her. All right, I won't call. Looking at his submissive behavior, I said in disbelief, Jeff, this is your mother. You've been missing for 3 years. She missed you so much that her eyes went nearly blind from crying. You can't even bear to make a single phone call to her? This might be the last time you two ever see each other. Jeff's body stiffened. Just as his lips moved, Nora tightly grabbed his arm. She looked entirely pure and innocent. As I said, my boyfriend is not your husband. How can you make him tell a lie to deceive people? Besides, he's not a doctor. Can making a phone call bring someone back to life? Can you please stop disturbing us? She rolled her eyes at me and signaled Jeff to close the door. Jeff was still hesitating, but Nora's hand had already restlessly slipped under his clothes. With that, he couldn't care about me anymore, hurriedly leaving behind a single sentence. I can't manage that much. You guys find a good doctor. The absolute heartlessness and coldness in his words left me in a daze. The door wasn't closed tightly, and the hurried gasps pierced into my ears like needles. His mother's life and death were uncertain, yet he could enjoy intimate moments of pleasure with another woman. For the first time in all these years, I truly saw the person in front of me clearly. After 3 years of searching for my husband, I finally had the answer. When I arrived at the airport, I was notified that my plane ticket had been cancelled. While I was feeling confused, Jeff's friend, Randall, dragged me into a car. Didn't you come to find Jeff? Why are you going back alone? Looking at the anxiety hidden in his eyes, I said calmly, didn't he say it himself? He isn't Jeff. Randall froze for a moment, quickly trying to fix it. You know he has amnesia, which is why he can't remember who he is. You can't be this cruel and just abandon him and leave. I sneered. Who abandoned whom? Who was the one who faked his death the moment I found out I was pregnant? Who abandoned his family and ignored them for 3 years? Before I even had a chance to question him, I happened to run into Jeff and Nora out shopping. Looking at the large and small gift boxes in their hands, I froze. Nora grabbed a handful of cheap wedding candies and shoved them into my hands, the smugness in her eyes completely impossible to hide. Jeff and I are getting married this Saturday. You should come. It'll be official then, and someone will finally give up. Jeff looked at her tenderly, his tone full of doting. We are having a shotgun wedding. In another 7 months, our baby will come into this world. Hearing his tone full of anticipation, my heart ached. Once, Jeff and I were also expecting a baby. A week before our honeymoon, I found out I was pregnant, and the entire family was overjoyed. However, while I was eagerly anticipating the arrival of the fruit of our love, he was busy plotting how to fake his death and fly away with his mistress. Even though I was carrying his own flesh and blood in my belly, it didn't cause him to waver even half a bit. If he truly didn't love me, he could have just refused this marriage. Why did he have to pretend to love me, only to deceive me until I was broken? The hard shells of the wedding candies dug into my palm, and the smug smile on Nora's face was the greatest mockery toward me. I knew clear as day that Jeff was doing this to solidify his relationship with Nora before returning to the Wingers. That way, he would have a completely justifiable reason to bring Nora back to the Wingers in the future. Meeting my gaze, Jeff did not look guilty at all. If you have time, come. I stayed silent for 2 seconds, then nodded. All right, I'll come. Perhaps some things had to be seen with your own eyes before you could truly give up. This wedding was far less grand than the one Jeff and I had back then, but it still cost a considerable amount of money. I heard from others that Jeff even borrowed quite a lot. In the past, he was the sole heir of the Wingers. He never worried about food or clothing, never lacked money in his hands, and never worked a proper job. After faking his death and living in seclusion here with Nora, he basically relied on borrowing money to survive. No wonder he was in such a rush to return to the Wingers. After all, to the Wingers, the money he borrowed was nothing but a drop in the bucket. However, Jeff didn't know that he could never go back to the Wingers. I took a light sip of wine and watched as Jeff excitedly slipped the wedding ring onto Nora's finger. That wedding ring officially put a complete end to the past 20 years of my youth. Looking at the two of them beaming with joy, I spoke calmly. I have already attended the wedding. You'll let me go home now, right? Jeff froze, a trace of panic flashing across his eyes. He thought I would cry and make a massive scene like before, but to his surprise, I looked as if I had completely accepted my fate. As if I believed he was not Jeff. If I left, though, what would he do about restoring his identity? Wait. Have we met somewhere before? Jeff hastily called out to stop me, clutching his head and pretending to have a flashback. Looking at his completely atrocious acting, a trace of mockery flashed across my eyes. You must be remembering wrong. We've never met before. You simply look like my husband, that's all. I returned every single word he had said to me back then. Jeff's face darkened slightly, but he kept up his amnesia persona and didn't dare to lose his temper. Then why are so many images suddenly popping into my head? Did you and I have a wedding? He pointed at the venue and spoke with hesitation. I remember, lilies of the valley placed here, and you were wearing a mermaid-style wedding dress. Listening to him recall our original wedding, the hatred in my heart only grew deeper and deeper. Having been childhood sweethearts for 20 years, I had long decided that I would marry Jeff. For that wedding back then, I prepared a full year in advance. Every single detail was filled with my beautiful hopes for love. However, Jeff had delivered me a crushing blow. He said we were going to Macondo for our honeymoon, but on the second day after going abroad, he vanished without a trace. Back then, the one who cried until she nearly went blind wasn't just my mother-in-law, but also me. At the time, I was so consumed by heartbreak that I suffered a miscarriage, all while having to face accusations from his family. Meanwhile, Jeff was probably holding his little lover and rolling around in the sheets, right? Looking up, Jeff was staring at me with a face full of guilt. I will try hard to remember those things. Why don't you take me home to see my parents first? Maybe I could. I smiled and interrupted him. I already told you all these things before, but didn't you have zero impression of them at the time? Not only did he have zero impression, but he also looked entirely impatient and tried to chase me away. I smiled and continued. Did you drink too much and mistake these things as your own memories? I wouldn't fail to recognize my own husband. You really aren't Jeff. Hearing those words, before Jeff could even panic, Nora did first. He obviously is. I stared straight at Nora. Didn't you insist he wasn't just a moment ago? Why the sudden change of heart? Did you catch amnesia too? Nora was instantly at a loss for words. I knew exactly what she was after. She wanted to climb the social ladder through Jeff. If Jeff couldn't restore his identity, she'd be even more anxious than he was. However, they had already talked themselves into a corner. Nora had cursed me as a mistress in public too many times. Though she must have enjoyed calling me that, she had now dug her own grave. Amid the whispers from the crowd, Randall stood up abruptly and pointed at me. He is Jeff. Hazel, I know you're angry about him being with Nora, but you can't just deny who he is. His parents have been searching for 3 years. Are you really going to let them bury their own son just for your own selfish reasons? Every eye in the room fell on me, accompanied by insults that I was a vicious and heartless woman. Randall shook his head and held up his phone. I knew you'd try to stop them from reuniting, so I made a call in advance and brought them here. Jeff breathed a sigh of relief and looked at me with disappointment. Hazel, what happened to you? At first, I thought, since I was wronging you by being with Nora, I'd give her some money and break up when I returned to the wingers. But I never expected you to be so unworthy of me giving up Nora. Watching his heartfelt performance, I curled my lip in mockery. So, you want to divorce me and bring Nora into the family? Jeff paused, a trace of hesitation flickering across his face. I knew exactly what he was hesitating about. I was his childhood sweetheart. Our families were equals in business and social status. Nora, however, came from poverty and couldn't provide him with any leverage. He was the type who always wanted it all. He wouldn't have faked his death for 3 years only to reveal his tracks if he didn't want to come back. Sure enough, Jeff spoke in a low voice. For the 3 years I had amnesia, it was Nora who stayed by my side, took care of me, and kept me company. I will not abandon her no matter what. As for you, I'm willing to give you a chance to turn over a new leaf out of our past relationship. From now on, you handle the external matters, while she handles the home. And you are not allowed to pick on her. I froze for a moment, then let out a snort. He really was dreaming of having the best of both worlds. Jeff missed the sarcasm on my face. Holding Nora's hand, he said passionately, Nora is pregnant with my child. This child is winger flesh and blood. I've already decided that he will be the future heir of the wingers. Nora looked at me provocatively, acting coy. Isn't that too hard on Hazel? Jeff frowned. Hard on her? It's hard on you. She's narrow-minded. Letting her continue to be Mrs. Winger is already doing her a favor. Watching their act, I said flatly, did I ever agree to share a husband with Nora? Nora looked delighted. You're willing to get a divorce? Jeff's expression shifted before he finally looked at me. If you force me to choose, I have no choice but to side with Nora. I laughed out loud. You don't have to choose. Because both of you are getting out. As soon as those words fell, the door opened, and my parents-in-law walked in together. Jeff lit up, and he hurried to greet them. Dad, Mom, I'm back. Nora stepped forward, cradling her barely visible belly, fawning over them. Today is a great day. The baby in my tummy is kicking. Jeff looked at me and vented angrily, if it weren't for Hazel trying to stop us, we would have reunited as a family long ago. Dad, Mom, you see her true colors now, don't you? However, faced with their enthusiasm, Daniel shoved his hand away, frowning. Who's your dad and mom? Don't just shout blindly. Our son has been dead for a long time. The silence that followed Daniel's words was heavy, suffocating the joyous music playing in the background of the wedding hall. Jeff's smile froze. His hand, which had been reaching out to clasp his father's shoulder, remained suspended in the midair. He chuckled, though the sound was hollow and strained. Dad, what are you saying? It's me. I know I've been gone for 3 years, and I know you're angry. But I had amnesia. I couldn't remember who I was. I only just started getting my memory back because of Hazel. Look at me, Dad. I'm your son. Jeff. Daniel didn't even blink. His face, weathered by 3 years of sleepless nights and relentless grief, was as cold as carved stone. He didn't look at Jeff with The warmth of a father reunited with his only child. He looked at him with profound disgust. My son died 3 years ago on a beach in Macondo, Daniel said, his voice carrying clearly over the hushed whispers of the wedding guests. The police searched for months. We held a funeral. We buried an empty casket. If you are claiming to be Jeff Winger, then you are nothing but an identity thief trying to swindle a grieving family. Dad. Jeff's voice cracked, a genuine note of panic finally breaking through his carefully rehearsed persona. He turned his eyes toward Lydia, who was leaning heavily on my arm. Mom, tell him. You know it's me. You're my mother. You kept calling my name when you were in the hospital, didn't you? I'm here. Now. Your son is right here. Lydia looked at him. Her eyes, which I had watched grow dim over 3 years of endless crying, were red-rimmed and wet. But there was no maternal yearning in them. Only a deep, aching weariness. My Jeff was a fool sometimes, but he was a man of honor, Lydia whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. He loved Hazel. He spent a year planning their wedding, picking out every flower, making sure she had the best of everything. The man standing before me is a coward who let his wife take the blame for his disappearance, who let her suffer the loss of her child alone, all while he hid away in another city with a mistress. No. My son is dead. You are not him. Beside Jeff, Nora's face had drained of all color. She stepped forward, her acrylic nails digging into Jeff's sleeve. Mr. and Mrs. Winger, how can you say that? She cried, her voice shrill with desperation. Look at his face. Look at his height, his voice. He has the exact same birthmark on his shoulder. We can do a DNA test right now. You can't just disown your own blood because of Hazel's jealousy. Randall, realizing his own position was quickly deteriorating, quickly chimed in. Uncle Daniel, Aunt Lydia, please be reasonable. I've known Jeff since we were kids. This is him. Hazel is just bitter because Jeff chose Nora. She's manipulating you because she wants to keep the Winger fortune for herself. Daniel turned his gaze to Randall. The sheer coldness in my father-in-law's eyes made the younger man take a step back. Randall, Daniel said quietly. Your father and I have been business partners for 20 years. But starting today, the Winger Group is pulling all investments from your family's logistics firm. We will be reviewing all joint contracts. I suggest you go home and tell your father to prepare his legal team. Randall's breath hitched. Uncle Daniel, you can't do that. That will ruin us. Then you should have thought about the consequences before you helped a coward fake his death and systematically torture my daughter-in-law for 3 years. Daniel replied coldly. Jeff stood there, his chest heaving. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of anger and betrayal. Hazel, is this what you wanted? He hissed, dropping the polite, distant tone he had used with me for days. You poisoned their minds against me. You told them to do this. Just because I don't love you anymore, you're willing to ruin my life? You're willing to destroy my family? I looked at the man I had loved for 20 years. I felt no anger. I felt no urge to scream or cry. I only felt a profound sense of pity, and a strange, liberating emptiness. I didn't destroy your family, Jeff, I said softly. You did that all by yourself. What do you mean by that? Jeff demanded, taking a step toward me. Before he could reach me, Daniel stepped in front of me, his tall frame shielding me completely. Do not touch her. I patted Daniel's shoulder gently, letting him know I was fine. I walked out from behind him, holding my phone in my hand. You think I'm bitter, Jeff? You think I'm doing this out of jealousy? I looked around at the wedding guests. Many of them were local business owners, minor associates, and acquaintances Jeff had made over the last 3 years under his assumed name. They were all watching this high-stakes family drama unfold with bated breath. A few days ago, I continued, my voice steady, I was ready to do anything to bring you home. I was ready to beg, to plead, to accept that you had amnesia and help you heal. But then, I stood outside a private booth at the bar. And I heard your conversation with Randall. Jeff's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of genuine terror crossing his face. I tapped my phone screen. A clear, high-quality audio recording began to play through the venue's Bluetooth speaker system, which I had quietly connected to earlier. 3 years ago, just to be with Nora, you faked your death during your honeymoon with Hazel. Now, you want to go back to living the good life as the heir of the Wingers, so you're pretending to have amnesia in front of her. Don't. You think you're being too hard on her? Randall's recorded voice echoed clearly through the hall. The guests gasped. whispering furiously. Then came Jeff's voice, cold, arrogant, and entirely devoid of any amnesia. Nora is already pregnant with my child. I must let her into the family. At first, I thought, since I was wronging Hazel by being with Nora, I'd give her some money and break up when I returned to the Wingers. But I never expected her to be so unworthy. Letting her continue to be Mrs. Winger is already doing her a favor. From now on, she handles the external matters, while Nora handles the home. And she is not allowed to pick on her. The audio cut off. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the waiters had stopped moving, staring at Jeff in disgust. Nora looked as if she might faint. She clutched her stomach, her face turning a sickly shade of gray. No, that's edited. It's a deep fake. Hazel. How could you do this to us? I didn't do anything, I said, tucking my phone back into my purse. I simply sent this recording to Daniel and Lydia 3 days ago. They flew here immediately. Not to welcome their long-lost son back, but to witness the sheer depth of his depravity. Daniel looked at the crowd. As the chairman of the Winger Group, I officially declare that the person known as Jeff Winger is legally dead. His death certificate was issued 2 years ago, and it will remain active. The man standing there is an imposter attempting to commit identity theft and financial fraud against our family estate. If he, or anyone associated with him, attempts to contact my family or access any Winger assets, we will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. Dad. You can't do this. Jeff screamed, his face contorting with rage. I'm your only son. Your only heir. Who else is going to inherit the Winger Group? Hazel? She's an outsider. You're going to give everything to an outsider? Lydia stepped forward, her voice sharp as steel. Hazel is the daughter we always wanted. She is the only one who cared for us, who kept this family together while you were playing house with your mistress. She is the sole trustee of our estate now. We signed the papers yesterday. What? Jeff's voice cracked. He looked at me, his eyes filled with disbelief. Hazel, you took my inheritance? No, I replied, looking him dead in the eye. I earned it. While you were spending your days avoiding work and living off borrowed money, I was working 16-hour days to keep the Winger Group from collapsing under the weight of your sudden death and the scandal that followed. I earned every single cent of what Daniel and Lydia gave me. I turned my back on him. Let's go, Mom, Dad. As we walked toward the exit, several men in dark suits stepped out from the crowd of guests, blocking Jeff and Nora's path. I recognized one of them. It was Mr. Vance, a local moneylender whom Jeff had borrowed heavily from over the past year, promising to pay him back, with interest, once he returned to his wealthy family. Mr. Winger, or whatever your name is, Mr. Vance said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. It seems your rich parents aren't planning on paying off your debts after all. I believe you owe my associates upwards of $200,000. Shall we discuss how you plan to settle that today? Jeff's desperate pleas echoed behind us as the heavy doors of the venue swung shut, cutting him off from our lives forever. 2 days later, it rained heavily. I was staying at a hotel near the airport, preparing to fly back home with Daniel and Lydia the next morning. Lydia's health had stabilized after she received proper medical attention, but she was still weak and preferred to rest in her room. I was sitting in the hotel lobby, sipping a warm cup of tea and watching the rain wash over the glass facade, when the front desk called me. Mrs. Winger, there is a gentleman downstairs who insists on seeing you. He says. His name is Jeff. I stared at the tea leaves swirling in my cup. Send him up to the lobby. A few minutes later, Jeff walked in. He looked completely different from the groomed, arrogant groom of 2 days ago. His hair was damp and messy, his clothes were wrinkled, and there were dark, bruised bags under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept or eaten in 48 hours. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. He rushed over and tried to grab my hands, but I quietly pulled them back, placing them in my lap. Hazel, he pleaded, his voice raspy. Please. You have to help me. The creditors. They took everything. They took the car, they took our savings. They even threatened to go after the apartment. Randall won't answer my calls. His father kicked him out because of what your father did to their business. I looked at him, my expression unreadable. And what does that have to do with me? Hazel, we were together for 20 years. Jeff cried, his voice crackling with emotion. He dropped to his knees beside my chair, ignoring the looks from the other hotel guests. We grew up together. We held hands in kindergarten. We had Our first kiss behind the old maple tree in your backyard. You can't tell me. You've forgotten all of that. You can't be this cruel. Cruel? I repeated the word, letting it linger in the air. You want to talk about cruelty, Jeff? I leaned forward, looking directly into his desperate, bloodshot eyes. 3 years ago, I found out I was pregnant. I was so happy. I designed our honeymoon rings myself, engraving our initials and the date of our babies. Expected arrival inside the band. I thought we were starting the most beautiful chapter of our lives. Jeff's lips trembled. Hazel, on the second day of our honeymoon, you went out to buy groceries and never came back. The police found your bloodied shirt near the cliffs. They told me. You must have fallen into the sea. I refused to believe it. I spent weeks searching the shoreline, screaming your name until my throat bled. My voice didn't shake. The tears had all been cried out years ago. There was only a cold, hard narrative left. When we returned home, your mother collapsed. Your father's hair turned white. Overnight. And me? I was blamed. Your extended family called me a jinx. They said I cursed you. I was so consumed by grief and guilt that I couldn't eat. One night, my head spun, and I fell down the stairs. Jeff flinched as if he had been physically struck. I lay on the cold floor for 2 hours before anyone found me, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. I lost the baby, Jeff. Our baby. A little boy. I had to sign the papers to cremate him alone. I sat in an empty nursery for 6 months, holding his ultrasound photo, wondering why God took both of you away from me. I didn't know, Jeff sobbed, burying his face in his hands. Hazel, I swear, I didn't know you lost the baby. I thought you would be sad, but I thought you'd move on. I didn't know. You didn't care, I corrected him coldly. You were too busy holding Nora. Living your free life away from the responsibilities of the Winger family. You wanted the thrill of a romance without the weight of a marriage. And when the thrill wore off and you ran out of money, you decided to play dead again, only this time, you wanted to play the returning hero with a convenient case of amnesia. I stood up, looking down at him. The plain band you wear on your finger now? It's cheap silver. You threw away the platinum ring I designed for you. Just like you threw away your family, your wife, and your child. You died to me 3 years ago, Jeff. The man kneeling before me is just a stranger with your face. And I don't talk to strangers. I turned to walk away, but Jeff grabbed the hem of my coat. Hazel, please. Nora is pregnant. If you don't help us, the baby won't have a future. Even if you hate me, the child is innocent. He's Winger blood. I stopped. I didn't look back, but my voice carried a chill that made him freeze. Winger blood? We'll see about that. The next day, we flew back to our hometown. Daniel and Lydia immediately arranged for a team of lawyers to handle the legal fallout. Since Jeff had been legally declared dead, his sudden resurrection caused a massive stir, but because he was refusing to officially register his return with the government, knowing that doing so would expose him to massive tax evasion, identity fraud, and credit card fraud charges under his assumed name, he remained a legal ghost. He was trapped. If he claimed to be Jeff Winger, the insurance company would sue him for the millions they had paid out to the family after his death, and he would face immediate arrest for fraud. If he remained Sean Robinson, the fake identity he had bought, he was legally penniless and hunted by local loan sharks. Meanwhile, I threw myself back into work at the Winger Group. I had no time to waste on him. But 3 weeks later, I received an unexpected visitor at the office. My secretary buzzed me. MS. Hazel, there is a woman named Nora Melville downstairs. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says she has urgent information regarding the Winger estate. I leaned back in my leather chair. A faint smile touched my lips. Send her up. When Nora entered my office, she looked nothing like the smug bride who had shoved wedding candies into my hand. She was wearing a cheap, oversized trench coat, her hair was greasy, and her makeup was hastily applied to cover the dark circles under her eyes. She looked around my spacious, elegant office with a mixture of envy and awe. Hazel, she said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. She tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. I know we didn't get off on the right foot. Sit down, Nora, I said, pointing to the chair opposite my desk. Let's skip the pleasantries. Why are you here? Nora sat down, clutching her designer purse, a knockoff, I realized, probably bought to maintain appearances. I want to make a deal, she said, leaning forward. Jeff is a loser. I see that. Now. He lied to me. He told me he was the heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire. And that once he recovered his memory, we would live in a mansion. But he's useless. He's completely broke, and the loan sharks are coming to our apartment. Every day. I can't live like this. So you're abandoning your husband? I asked, raising an eyebrow. The man you had a shotgun wedding with just 3 weeks ago. Nora snorted, a look of pure disdain crossing her face. Husband? The wedding wasn't even legally registered. He couldn't use his real name, and I wasn't going to sign papers with a fake one. And as for the baby. She paused, looking at me carefully. I know how much you wanted a child, Hazel. Jeff told me about your miscarriage. A cold spike of anger flared in my chest at the mention of my lost child, but I kept my face perfectly calm. What about the baby, Nora? I'm willing to give him to you, Nora whispered, her eyes gleaming with greed. Once he's born, I will sign over all parental rights to you and the Wingers. In exchange, I want $5 million. With that money, I can start over somewhere else, and you get the Winger heir you always wanted. It's a win-win. I looked at her, amazed by the sheer, unadulterated selfishness of the woman before me. She was willing to sell her unborn child to the very woman she had insulted and mocked just weeks ago. $5 million is a lot of money, Nora, I said slowly. But before I even consider such an offer, I have a question. What is it? She asked eagerly. Is the baby really Jeff's? Nora's expression stiffened. The color drained from her cheeks, and her hand fly to her stomach. Of course he is. Who else would it be? Well, I said, pulling a manila folder from my desk drawer and sliding it toward her. According to the private investigator I hired, you spent a lot of time at a local nightclub called the Crimson Velvet during the first year you lived with Jeff. Specifically, you spent a lot of time in the private office of the owner, a man named Marcus Vance. Nora's breath hitched. She stared at the folder but didn't open it. Marcus Vance, I continued, is the very same moneylender who lent Jeff $200,000. The investigator's report suggests that you were the one who introduced Jeff to Marcus, encouraging him to borrow money to fund your lavish lifestyle. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a cool, precise whisper. The report also includes a copy of your medical records from a private clinic in the neighboring city. You had a prenatal checkup 4 months ago. The conception date doesn't align with the weeks Jeff was away on his business trips to source supplies. But it aligns perfectly with a weekend you spent at Marcus Vance's beach villa. Nora stood up so fast her chair screeched against the marble floor. This is slander. You're making this up. Am I? I asked calmly. We can easily arrange a prenatal paternity test. If the baby is Jeff's, we can talk. But if he isn't? I smiled. I wonder how Jeff will react when he finds out he threw away his entire life, his family, and his inheritance for a woman who was sleeping with the very loan shark who is currently ruining him. Nora stared at me, her chest heaving. She realized she had no cards left to play. Without a word, she snatched her purse, turned on her heels, and practically ran out of my office. 2 days later, the storm finally broke. I received a call from a local police precinct in the city where Jeff and Nora lived. Apparently, a violent altercation had occurred at their apartment. When I arrived at the station, accompanied by our family lawyer, I found Jeff sitting in a holding cell. His face was bruised, his lip was split, and his shirt was torn. He looked like a hollow shell of a man. In the interrogation room next door, Marcus Vance was being questioned by detectives. Our lawyer spoke with the officer in charge, then walked over to me. It seems Jeff found the investigator's report, he explained quietly. Nora left it on the kitchen counter when she was packing her bags to flee. Jeff confronted her. And she admitted everything. She told him the baby wasn't his, and that she had only used him to get to the Winger fortune. And the fight? I asked. Jeff went crazy. He tracked down Marcus Vance at his club and tried to attack him. Vance's bodyguards beat him up and called the police. Because Jeff was carrying identification papers under a false name, the police ran his prints. They found out he's legally dead and has been using a fraudulent identity for 3 years to avoid creditors. I nodded slowly. Can I speak to him? Yes, but only for a few minutes. The guard unlocked the cell door, and I walked inside. Jeff didn't look up at first. He sat on the metal bench, staring at the floor, his hands trembling. She lied to me, he whispered, his voice cracking. Every single word she told She loved me. She told me she didn't care about the money. She said we would build a life together. She saw an easy target, Jeff, I said, standing near the door. You wanted to play the romantic rebel, and she wanted a ticket to high society. You both deserved each other. Jeff finally looked up at me. His eyes were completely hollow, stripped of all the arrogance and warmth they once held. Hazel, please. Talk to Dad. Tell him to bail me out. I'll do anything. I'll work at the bottom of the company. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Just don't leave me here. I can't go to prison. You aren't going to prison because of me, Jeff, I said softly. You're going to prison because of your own choices. You chose to fake your death. You chose to commit fraud. You chose to abandon the people who loved you. I was stupid. He screamed, tears finally spilling over his bruised cheeks. I was young and stupid. I didn't think it would turn out like this. You were 27, Jeff. You weren't a child. You were a grown man who wanted the rewards of a family without the sacrifice. I pulled a small velvet box from my purse and placed it on the bench beside him. He looked at it, his breath catching. With trembling fingers, he opened the box. Inside lay the platinum wedding ring I had designed for him 3 years ago, the one he had left behind in our honeymoon hotel room. I found it in your luggage when the police returned your belongings back then. I said. I kept it for 3 years, hoping that one day, if you ever came back, I would understand why you left. I turned toward the exit. Now I understand. And I don't need it anymore. Hazel. Don't leave me. Hazel. His desperate cries followed me down the long, sterile corridor of the police station, but with every step I took, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. 6 months later. The autumn air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and fresh rain. I stood on the balcony of the Winger Group headquarters, looking out over the sprawling skyline of the city. Below, the streets were bustling with life, a constant reminder of the world moving forward. Lydia's health had improved significantly. With the truth fully out and the ghost of her son's betrayal finally laid to rest, she had found a sense of peace. She and Daniel spent most of their time traveling now, leaving the day-to-day operations of the company entirely in my hands. Jeff had been sentenced to 4 years in a federal penitentiary for identity theft, bank fraud, and tax evasion. The Winger family lawyers had ensured that no leniency was granted. He was serving his time in a facility upstate, completely cut off from the wealth and privilege he had once taken for granted. Nora Melville had disappeared from the city shortly after the scandal broke. The last I heard, she had given birth to a baby boy, but Marcus Vance had refused to acknowledge the child, leaving her to raise him alone in a small town hours away, struggling to make ends meet. As for Randall, his family's business had collapsed under the weight of the pulled Winger investments, forcing them to file for bankruptcy. He was now working as a low-level clerk in another state, his dreams of easy wealth shattered. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from Daniel. Hazel, Lydia and I just landed in Rome. The weather is beautiful. We saw a lovely gallery today and thought of you. Remember to take some time off and enjoy yourself. You've worked hard enough. I smiled and typed a quick reply, wishing them a safe trip. As I tucked the phone away, my secretary entered the balcony. Ms. Hazel, the board of directors is ready for the quarterly meeting. Thank you, Sarah. I'll be right there. I took one last look at the sky. For 3 long years, I had lived in the shadow of a lie, torturing myself with questions that had no answers. I had let another person's cruelty define my worth. But standing here today, I realized that the ending of one story was simply the beginning of another. I smoothed down my suit jacket, turned around, and walked back inside, ready to face the future I had built with my own 2 hands.